Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. What if I told you that the human hand doesn't just interact with reality, it actually sculpts it, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but through a neurological architecture so precise, so deliberate, that once you understand how it works, you'll never look at your own fingers the same way again. There's a reason certain knowledge about the hand was kept out of mainstream neuroscience for decades. A reason why the connection between touch, intention, and perception was studied in private circles but never popularized. Because once you understand what your hand is actually doing when it reaches for something, when it gestures, when it rests on a surface, you realize you've been shaping your inner world this entire time. And no one ever told you. This isn't about biology. This isn't about anatomy. This is about control. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Subscribe now, because what you're about to hear will change how you see your own mind. Most people think the hand is a tool, an instrument the brain uses to manipulate objects, pick things up, put things down. But that's the surface explanation, the one that keeps you comfortable. The real function of the hand, according to suppressed neuropsychological models, is far stranger. It doesn't just respond to the world, it authors it. There's a pattern here. A loop that begins the moment you first grasped something as an infant and has been running silently ever since. But the real reason is darker. The hand doesn't just touch reality, it negotiates with it, it proposes, it confirms, and in doing so, it creates the boundaries of what you believe is possible. Read this carefully, because this is where it changes. In the late 1970s, a small research group operating outside institutional oversight began documenting something they called the Haptic Authorship Principle. Their work was never published. Their findings were kept in private notebooks, circulated only among those who had been invited to understand. The lead researcher, whose name appeared in no academic journal, wrote in the margins of one manuscript, "The hand does not discover the world, it declares it." What did that mean? At first, even the team didn't fully understand. But over years of observation, pattern recognition, and behavioral analysis, a model emerged, one that explained why people who lose the use of their hands often report not just physical limitation, but a collapse in their sense of agency, a fading of inner authority. As if the hand wasn't just moving objects, it was anchoring identity itself. Here's what they found. Every time you reach for something, your brain doesn't wait to feel it, it predicts it. It generates a simulation of the texture, the weight, the temperature before contact even happens. And when your hand touches the object, the brain compares the prediction to the reality. If they match, the world feels solid, reliable. But if they don't, the brain updates, it revises, it learns. And over time, this process doesn't just help you navigate the world, it builds your sense of what is real. Most people miss this. They think reality is something that exists independently and the hand just interacts with it. But the manuscript suggests otherwise. It says the hand is a reality testing device, a biological instrument that continuously confirms or challenges the brain's model of the world. And here's the twist. The more you touch, the more you reach, the more you manipulate, the more rigid your reality becomes. Because every successful prediction strengthens the model. Every confirmation tells the brain, yes, this is how things are. And over time, you stop testing. You stop reaching for the unexpected. You stop touching the unfamiliar. Your hand becomes a tool of repetition. And repetition becomes the architecture of your perception. This is why people in monotonous environments, people who touch the same objects day after day, report a narrowing of imagination, a flattening of possibility. It's not psychological fatigue, it's neurological imprisonment. The hand has locked the world into place. But there's another layer, one the original researchers hesitated to name. They called it the gestural binding effect. The idea that certain hand movements, repeated over time, bind emotional states to physical reality. Think about it. When you clench your fist in anger, you're not just expressing emotion, you're encoding it. When you open your palm in surrender, you're not just letting go, you're programming a neural signature the body remembers. And the hand, because of its vast representation in the motor cortex, has more memory capacity than almost any other part of the body. So when you repeat a gesture, especially during moments of high emotion, you're not just moving, you're writing into your nervous system, creating a reflex, a shortcut, a pattern that will trigger again, unbidden. the next time the world resembles that moment. One of the notebooks described a case study, a person who, as a child, always gripped the edge of a table during family arguments. Years later, as an adult, whenever they felt tension in the conversation, their hand would drift toward the nearest surface, seeking an edge, seeking something to hold. They didn't know why, they'd never made the connection, but the hand remembered. The hand had authored a rule. When the world destabilizes, grip something solid. And that rule became automatic. Invisible, a background program running without consent. This is the part no one talks about. The hand doesn't just respond to your intentions, it also imposes them. It creates habits you never consciously chose. It builds rituals you don't remember starting. And because the hand is so automatic, so fluid, you assume the patterns are yours. But they're not. They're echoes, loops, neurological fossils from moments you've long forgotten. The manuscript asked a question that still unsettles. If the hand can bind emotion to gesture, can it unbind it? Can you reverse the process? Can you touch differently, move differently? And in doing so, rewrite the reality your nervous system has been confirming for years. Some truths don't spread easily, not because they're false, but because they decentralize power. If people understood that their hands were actively shaping their perception of reality, they'd realize how much control they actually have, how much of what they assume is fixed is actually authored. And that threatens systems built on passivity, on acceptance, on the belief that the world is happening to you, not with you. So the research stayed quiet, the findings stayed private. And most people continued living as if the hand was just a tool, just a mechanism, never understanding that it was also a sculptor, a writer, a gatekeeper between the brain and the world. But here's where it gets darker, because the hand doesn't just shape your external reality. It also polices your internal one. There's a phenomenon the researchers called proprioceptive censorship, the idea that certain gestures, certain movements are suppressed before they even begin, not by conscious choice, but by an internal governor. A system that monitors what your hand is reaching for and decides in milliseconds whether to allow it. Think about the last time you wanted to reach out and touch someone. Not sexually, not violently, just reach, to comfort, to connect, to ground yourself in the warmth of another person. How many times did your hand stop midair? How many times did it retreat before contact? That wasn't politeness. That wasn't social conditioning alone. That was the hand, checking with the brain's threat detection system, asking, is this safe? Is this allowed? And most of the time the answer is no, because the hand has learned. It has learned that reaching leads to rejection, that touch leads to misunderstanding, that openness leads to exposure, and so it stops, it censors. It edits your impulses in real time, creating a version of you that never fully expresses, never fully connects, and you don't even notice, because the censorship happens before the intention becomes conscious. The hand decides for you. This is why some people feel restless, why they feel like there's a version of themselves they can't access. It's not buried in the mind, it's buried in the body, in the hand that has learned to stop reaching, in the fingers that have learned to stay still. One section of the manuscript described a technique, a practice developed to bypass proprioceptive censorship. It involved deliberate, unfamiliar hand movements, gestures that had no learned meaning, no emotional residue. The theory was simple. If the hand's patterns were keeping reality rigid, then disrupting those patterns might soften it, might open gaps, might allow new possibilities to emerge. People who practiced this reported strange experiences, a sudden sense of space around them, a feeling that objects were less solid than they seemed, that the boundaries between self and world were negotiable. Some found it liberating. Others found it terrifying. Because when the hand stops confirming reality, reality becomes uncertain. And uncertainty, for a nervous system built on prediction, feels like danger. This isn't memory, this is architecture. The hand has been building your world, gesture by gesture, touch by touch, for your entire life. And most of what you think is real is just confirmed, repeated, locked in. You do this, your mind does this, your hand does this, every time you reach for the familiar, every time you avoid the unfamiliar. Every time you pull back instead of reaching forward, you're not protecting yourself, you're narrowing yourself. You were never taught to stop. You were never taught that the hand is also a choice, that every gesture is a vote for the kind of reality you want to live in. And you've been voting for safety, for repetition, for the known, without ever realizing there was another option. So what does this mean? It means your sense of limitation isn't just mental, it's physical, encoded in the very movements you make, the things you reach for, the things you avoid. The hand doesn't just express your reality, it enforces it. And if you want to change what feels possible, you don't start with your thoughts, you start with your touch. This changes how you see yourself. This explains your silence. Why certain conversations feel impossible, why certain connections never happen. Because your hand learned, long ago, not to reach, and that pattern has been running ever since. Invisible, automatic, unchallenged. This explains your restlessness, the feeling that something is locked, that there's a version of life you can sense but can't access. It's not out there, it's in here. In the gestures you've repeated so many times they've become invisible. In the touches you've withheld so often they feel forbidden. The hand isn't just a limb. It's a boundary. And that boundary can be rewritten, not through force, not through willpower, but through awareness, through deliberate disruption, through reaching differently, touching differently, moving as if the world is softer than you've been taught to believe. You don't need to erase the past. You don't need to undo every pattern the hand has built. But you do need to finish it, not in reality, but in your mind. You need to recognize that the hand's authority is borrowed, that the rules it enforces were written in moments you barely remember, and that those rules can be questioned, tested, revised. The hand controls reality, but only because you let it, only because you believed the predictions, only because you stopped reaching for what felt uncertain. And the moment you start reaching again, even in small ways, even in private, the world begins to respond, not because it changed, but because you did, because the hand, your hand, started authoring something new. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, share this, and stay aware. Your mind is powerful, but only if you understand it.